You want to enjoy whiskey, but you don't want the whiskey burn. Well, what if whiskey wasn't hard to drink? What if it was easy? What if I told you it can be? Try the light, easy taste of Canadian Mist whiskey. Triple distilled and aged in oak on the shores of the Georgian Bay. Canadian Mist. All whiskey, no bite. Drink responsibly. Canadian Mist, blended Canadian whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume, Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Hey, we say hello to you on this Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday. It's Thursday. Just kidding. Just testing. Mark Kubiak to see if he was still there. Anyway, welcome back to the show. We're all just hungover today after watching one of the greatest rivalries in all of sports last night in Durham. Nothing like a Duke, North Carolina game to make us forget about Kansas and Missouri and Alabama and Auburn and games that actually matter. We'll talk about that today and your phone calls as well. 855-242-7285 is the number of guests as well, but we'll kind of kick back and have some fun. We briefly alluded to this yesterday, and we decided to push it off because the mascot competition was so exciting. Smokey won, by the way. What about the best rivalries in all of sports? We saw one last night. I don't think anyone is disputing that. But this is according to Sports Center. Those are our friends in Connecticut who put on the most watched daily sportscast in the world. They came up with this. Canadians and Bruins at the bottom. UConn, Tennessee, they don't even play anymore. Harvard, Yale. Yeah, you can listen to me as I go through it. Barcelona and Real Madrid. Michigan, Ohio State, number 6. Packers, Bears, number 5. Lakers, Celtics, Army, Navy, UNC, Duke in basketball, Yankees, Red Sox. Nowhere. Alabama, Auburn. It has nothing to do with where I've lived a good bit of my life or the game that I've covered so many times. But how do you leave Auburn and Alabama off a list like that? Only if you're an Eastern snob who looks down on the South. That's the only way I can come up with it. Anyway, we'll give you a chance to participate both on the show and, of course, via Twitter. The hashtag, of course, today will be the key, and we'll give that to you momentarily because I'm not campaigning for anything. I mean, this is somebody's opinion that obviously has a bigger platform than we do, but the hashtag is Finebaum Rivalries. You can tell us what you think. So what makes a great rivalry? Gave it a lot of thought overnight. Certainly what I saw last night was impressive. A great crowd, great proximity. How about intensity? I mean, if you have two teams that play each other every year like Tennessee and Florida, it used to be a great rivalry. It's not anymore. You have to have memorable moments. You have to have some history. It's not like Washington plays Boston College one time and it's a great game. There's no real connection. You have to have some history. And geography helps, too. You can also, your own ingredients. There's no guarantee. History, geography, moments, intensity. That's what it's all about in a great rivalry. I've covered the Alabama-Auburn rivalry for 35 years. What makes that so great? Well, the fact that the fans are so passionate about that, and that's another word we could use, passion. If you don't have passion about a rivalry, then what difference does it make? There's some really good matchups in college football. You start thinking of those great games. Notre Dame and SC is one of the great games most years. Is that a rivalry on the same level as Michigan, Ohio State, or Alabama, Auburn, or Georgia, Florida? No. They both have, it's traditional. Oklahoma and Texas is a flat-out rivalry. You don't have to hate, but it doesn't hurt. What about you? What do you think?
Well, what about mutual success? What happens if one team just hasn't been up to par? For instance, Tennessee, we talk about Tennessee and Florida. Obviously not a great national rivalry, but we found on this show serious bitterness between the two fan bases. Florida, what's it been, 10 times in a row?
Yeah.
How much does mutual success matter?
I think it does matter. I think familiarity also matters. I was once talking to a friend of mine who coaches for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we were talking about some of the intense rivalries in the in the National Football League. And I said, what's the game every year that you guys get the most fired up about? He said, the Ravens. I said, why is that? He said, because we hate their – I mean, they just hate each other. I mean, you understand that.
Absolutely.
And I think when you hate the other guy, it makes a difference. Alabama, Auburn, hate. Oklahoma, Texas, hate. I mean, Oklahoma used to have a great rivalry with Nebraska. I'm not sure it was built as much on hate as it was history. There is a difference. And I was talking to a person today who watched the game last night. And the lady said, I hate North Carolina. She wasn't a Duke fan. She was an NC State fan. That's a different rivalry, NC State and North Carolina. But if the enemy of my enemy is my friend, if you hate North Carolina and you're an NC State fan, you like Duke. If you're, Georgia-Auburn is a traditional rivalry. Only in recent years has it become somewhat of a hate rivalry. It used to be very respectful. There are other rivalries like that in the SEC, but they change. What's changed the SEC the most? It's the divisional play that started in 1992. Tennessee-Alabama used to be the biggest game of the year, every year. Suddenly, in the 90s, partly because of Peyton Manning at Tennessee and Spurrier at Florida, Tennessee-Florida became the biggest game of the year, and then it changed. What became the biggest game of the early part of the last decade. LSU-Auburn used to be a really huge game, and then LSU-Alabama became the game. Briefly, Texas A&M was the game because of Manziel. I mean, it's a revolving door, but things do change.
What's the future of rivalries in college football? I'm just thinking this new college football playoff era. You're rooting for teams within your conference. Therefore, the committee looks at you in a different light, understanding if you played in the SEC, you'd deserve a spot in the college football playoff. It's almost like these cross-conference rivalries may be the future. For instance, Florida State and Florida. That's one rivalry that I think is rich with tradition that moving forward could overtake maybe a rivalry within the SEC because fan bases now, because of this new era of college football, root for one another when they're not playing.
Most of the time, yeah. There's still some places and some teams that people can't root for. But anyway, we'll get into that conversation. A number of guests as well, reflecting back on last night. Pretty interesting night of college basketball. We'll grab some calls here, and let's start. He's become one of our go-to guys early in the show. Lance up in Tennessee. Yeah, Lance.
Yeah, we ain't talking about world peace. We're just talking about sports. I can't get no peace when you got Kentucky fans calling in, running their mouth. I don't know how many times I got to say it, Paul. I'm going to tell you one more time. 4 national championships to year 2, Coach K. He's coached against Kentucky 6 times. He's beat on 5, son. He owns Kentucky. He rebuilt the USA basketball. He won this USA 2 gold medals. Show a little bit of respect. Don't call him and say he's a good coach. He's a great coach. And like I said yesterday, Tennessee football fans, you ain't got to remind me how good Pat Summitt is, Paul, because in the 90s when the Gators were beating them down at football, I used to tell them, don't worry, boys. Basketball's coming. Pat Summitt will win you another national championship. And I'm going to tell you one more thing. Alabama makes me sick. You went out like Anthony Grant, ruining your tradition. You never had any basketball tradition. You got lucky with Robert Ory and Latrell Sprewell. You ain't never had a basketball tradition. You won't never get to play us because it's a football program, and you can forget it, son. Get some of my nerves, Bob.
Thank you, Lance. Lance, starting us off from Tennessee. Pat is in Alabama. Pat.
Oh,
how are you, Pat?
Hey, I've been trying to call you ever since the day after you came up here in August, and the line was busy.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was great to see you that night in Huntsville at that book signing, and certainly I've corresponded with your friend Sparrow a couple of times, but that was a special night, Pat.
It was, and we sent you a picture of me and my sister when we were real little. And I think I was 4 and she was 3, and we were holding hands. That's the bond I got with her.
Right. How have you been doing?
I've been doing okay at times. Then at other times I don't do too well. I'm still having a hard time dealing with it.
I know you've had a tough year.
Yeah, and Lord, it's great to talk to you, Paul, and I'll try to call in when I can get through.
Well, Pat, number one, I appreciate you getting through and miss talking to you, and please say hello to everyone up in North Alabama.
I will.
You bet. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Pat's been, for those new listeners and viewers, Pat's been calling the show for a long time. She lost her vision at a very early age, and whenever I've been to her area, her friends and family have brought her out, and she's just a really special, dear person. We'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue on this topic and get you more of your phone calls at 855-242-7285.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We welcome you back, chatting about rivalries, chatting about some of the big games of this week. Big rivalry game on Tuesday night. Hasn't been much of one lately, but still pretty serious if you're a Tennessee fan, with Kentucky beating the Vols, and, of course, last night at Cameron Indoor, Duke in overtime beating North Carolina. They'll play again, and they play again and again. It's fun to watch, but it's not the end of the world like some rivalry games. Jumbo is up next. Hey, Jumbo.
Hey, Paul, I'm a little ticked off right here, so bear with me. I'm not going to be mean and say anything crazy, but I'm a Navy man. I did 22 years, and I did retire from the Navy, so I think Army-Navy is one of the big rivalries. I think Alabama and Auburn is a huge rivalry. And the other ones, you can kind of, they got an argument there. But this guy, Lance, he's about to tick me off. He needs to keep his mouth shut because he's a Florida fan, right?
I'm really not sure what he is.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean,
we're labeling him as a Kentucky
I know
hater.
one thing. When people see Florida on their schedule, they don't shake in their boots. When they see Alabama on their schedule, they start shaking, and they get scared, and they circle the date. So, Lance, you need to wake up and realize, son, you ain't got a football team. Right now, you got a bunch of wussies that are just playing. Come to Alabama. That's all you got to do. You'll have a real football team then, son.
Okay. Lance, I hope you're taking notes. Mark is up next. Hey, Mark, thank you. Good afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it. Just want to say that I'm in sales. I've got you on every afternoon, and you make the second half of my afternoon much more enjoyable.
Thank you.
Today is the greatest day of the year, Paul. Today is Pitchers and Catchers Report, and it's with that in mind that I want to submit two good rivalries that I did not hear mentioned. One was the Cubs and the Cardinals, and I grew up near St. Louis, but I've been a lifelong Cub fan, so I'm not even allowed to enjoy anything red. And the other rivalry that came to my mind was the Giants and the Dodgers.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I grew up a Cardinal fan as well, Yankees on the AL side, and because I lived near St. Louis, Cardinals. And I've been to a few Cardinal Cub games, and you're absolutely right. It's if you St. Louis, first of all, is just a great baseball town, maybe the best in the country. And the Dodgers and the Dodgers and the Giants, there's a lot to that rivalry. Not only are they in the same division and the same state, they used to be in the same city.
Right.
The Dodgers were in Brooklyn at Ebbets Field, and the Giants in New York at the Polo Grounds. If you ask me how I know all that, my mother grew up a New York Giants fan, and I heard those stories my entire childhood.
I've got to think just purely for the number of years, it's got to be Dodgers and Giants. I would think that's got to be.
Yeah, no, there's hate's a big word, but many brawls have been started back in the day on the streets of New York over the Giants and the Dodgers.
Yeah, one of the most vivid baseball memories I have as a young man was I don't think I had reached the age of 10 yet, or very close, and my father and I had come back from a Cardinal game, and a busload of Cub fans pulled up next to a busload of Cardinal fans, purely by some miscalculation. But I remember seeing men pulling each other out of the windows of the bus ugliest fights I ever saw in my life.
Yeah, no. Yeah, thanks for the call, Mark. I mean, Yankees-Red Sox is a little different. I mean, it's more, you have two cities both claiming intellectual superiority. There's history that goes back to the beginning of baseball, but some of those other rivalries are hard to describe. And Jim is next in Arkansas. Hey, Jim.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
Doing great, thank you.
Oh, thanks to get through. I've been trying to call you. I'm from Rogers, Arkansas. What about Texas and Arkansas?
Yeah, it's a great one. I mean, not only was that once an annual deal, but they played in 1969 in one of the most famous games in college football history.
Yes. How do you think Arkansas is going to do this year?
Very well. I haven't made a final call yet, but I mean, it's a cliche to say we're high on the Hogs, but we are. I really like what Coach Bielema is doing, and I think steady improvement for the Hogs, maybe more than steady.
Okay. Hey, thanks for letting me through. I appreciate it. Hey, great show. I love it, and I'll try to get back in here.
Hope you will, Jim. Yeah, I happened to be in Little Rock, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, speaking to a club, and they were honoring the players from that rivalry game in 1969. And it's still talked about to this day. It was a 1-versus-2 game at the end of the season. ABC Sports had the game was originally in October, and they decided to take a chance. This stuff doesn't always work out. They put the game, I believe it was on December 6th, last weekend of the college football season, and turned out to be an epic game won by Texas 15-14. Frank Broyles versus Darrell Worrell, two of the great coaches of that era. Let's move along and talk to Stephen, who's up next. Hey, Stephen, good afternoon.
Yeah, I think President Nixon showed up at that game. Seemed like I saw a clip not too long ago.
He did.
Yeah.
The funny part was that Penn State was also undefeated that year, and Nixon showed up. This was before Watergate engulfed his presidency, and he just said arbitrarily, the winner of this game is the national champion. And, Joe Paterno did not take kindly to that.
Yeah, Nixon, he was interesting. I want to say something about Duke and Carolina, but before it escapes me, Kenny Charles from Reeltown. I was sitting at a burger joint when Reeltown came up to Fife, Alabama in the playoffs and got to talking to a fella. Turns out he was the superintendent of schools, and he knew Kenny. But this fella also is a retired Army man, and he was a pretty good friend of General Colin Powell. So that's amazing. You don't have to go just one person away. Kenny Charles from Reeltown to General Colin Powell. So
and by the way, we try not to give away internal secrets on this show, but having met Charles a couple of times, his real name is Kenny. So that's what the superintendent said. He forgets. Charles forgets sometime when he's on the show. He goes into his Charles from Reeltown mode, and that's why he was at home alone on Saturday night. Kenny would have probably found himself a date because Kenny's a much nicer person than Charles.
Well, as rivalries go, I just think ACC basketball is just a class above everything else, and that Carolina Duke game was one. I thought Roy's boys had it last night with 5 up with just a few minutes to go, but they couldn't pull it off. Listen, for future reference, when you touch basketball, when the NC State game comes up, there's a great piece, Grantland, the sports website. Sure. Ron Rash wrote about David Thompson, and the first time David Thompson showed his greatness, this Rash, who's now an internationally acclaimed novelist from Gardner-Webb, and that's near Shelby, North Carolina, saw David Thompson come out of the stands, played some team from New Orleans who was there, just picked it, and as a ninth grader, David Thompson was beating down this guy who was like his second year in college, so it's just a great story.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, David Thompson, of course, played on Norm Sloan's great teams in the early 70s that ended UCLA's run of national championships, with NC State winning in 1974. Ron is up next in Florida. Hey, Ron, thank you for the phone call.
What's going on, Paul?
Doing great.
Glad to see you in better health, man. So you had a rookie in there Friday, man. Horrible job on that rookie. I was on hold for like 2 hours trying to shout out my lady for Valentine's Day, but it's all good. So I wanted to comment real quick about the Florida State-Florida rivalry. I think that's the best one. And I also wanted to slow up Jimbo real quick, because one thing you have to remember is when Alabama was down, you still didn't want to play them. I remember when they had Pro Bowl and all that kind of stuff. You just never wanted to play Alabama because of the history and the type of players they can produce and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Florida. We're big dogs as well. Documentation and footage of it on ESPN all the time for them to see it. With 90s players of Alabama were talking about how they were trembling for Florida. And that's never going to deteriorate just because of who we are. Doesn't mean we're the best all the time, but, hey, we just are who we are. As far as the Tennessee rivalry, that to me right now is like, right now at this point, I understand that in order for us to do what we need to do in the East, we're going to have to beat Tennessee and Georgia. I'm not concerned about Missouri, not to disrespect the Pinkel. They just are not going to be able to do it. I don't feel like when those two programs and the rest of the SEC East picks back up, I don't think Missouri is going to be able to handle it.
Well, Ron, I think you can often tell if you look at games every year in the SEC, which school gets the opposition the most fired up, and I think in recent years it's been Alabama. Certainly this year, Ole Miss, it was the biggest game of the year. It was the biggest game of the year in Baton Rouge. That's just the way Alabama rolls. You had the same thing, Arkansas, Alabama coming in. Florida used to be like that. It may be again. Other schools come and go, but for the most part, rivalries change over time, and I think the biggest change in the SEC has been the Tennessee-Florida game. That was the game of 10 or 15 years ago, and I mean this year the game, I think it started at noon in Knoxville, and it wasn't even close to. It wasn't even the biggest game in its time slot this year. It happened to go off the same time as the A&M Mississippi State game, and later that day we had Ole Miss and Alabama. So I mean that game has really taken a back seat.
It has, but look at this though, Paul. Like if you look at and I'm shocked at you a little bit because I look at your and I'm shocked because with you being around for so long and seeing it so long, you know how history keeps on repeating itself a lot.
Sure.
But when you look at the East right now, there's three teams that you can say over the next 3 to 5 years, these teams are going to be dominant over here. And I feel like right now it's like a pressure cooker for Tennessee and Florida. That rivalry, and then Tennessee, Georgia, and Tennessee and Georgia and Florida is going to just be a big deal over the next 3 to 5. You're absolutely right, though. Alabama, like, regardless. I mean, that history, you can't compare with it. You really can't. So as a Florida fan, I'm not one of those that's just going to just talk. I like reality. And you got to be realist and say that Alabama is who they are. But I just feel like Florida.
Well, but Ron, things do change. And, obviously when Tebow was there, everyone wanted to see Florida play. There were years when Alabama wasn't all that big a deal, but they are now.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Ken Pomeroy joins us. He is with KenPom.com, and we were just joking during the break about his analytics. And Ken, thank you very much. Really enjoy visiting. Before we even get to all the what, when, how questions, talk a little bit about your website, KenPom.com, and how do you come up with all this stuff?
Yeah, it's just a website really designed to provide folks with, I guess, the most advanced numbers on what every college basketball team does well, what they don't do well, what players do well, et cetera. I have a ratings formula that's based on things like offensive and defensive efficiency, so the points that are scored or allowed per possession by each team. That's really the basic core of the site to come up with the ratings, and all those numbers behind the ratings are adjusted for schedule strength, when the games are played, and things like that. So it's just something born out of my own enthusiasm for the sport. And obviously with 351 teams, it's really hard for any human to keep track of them all. So this is kind of a tool to help us all do that.
We were just looking at some of your numbers about Florida being the unluckiest team, followed by Vanderbilt. So I guess you had great interest in the game last night, huh? I mean, which team would be the most unlucky? It looked like Vanderbilt won that battle but lost the war.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially with Michael Frazier and Dorian Finney-Smith out for Florida. It's pretty interesting that Vanderbilt still couldn't pull out the victory. But, the funny thing was Florida, was leading the country by far in that luck metric on the negative side, that even with a close win, with a little bit of good fortune going their way, this morning they still own a small lead over Vandy. But it's, kind of unusual that the two statistically unluckiest teams are both in the same conference right now.
I realize that analytics are done based on numbers and whatever else analytics are done on. I apologize, I'm not a numbers guru, but try to explain a little bit. This team a year ago went through the SEC undefeated, made it to the national semifinal. I realize it's not the same team. A lot of people have moved on from that great team, but how do you explain Florida's misfortune so far?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just the roster turnover. They lost, 3 very good starters who were all seniors, so, a lot of experience off of that roster. They just haven't really filled that in with a lot of effectiveness. They've had some issues, too, with various suspensions and injuries. Eli Carter's been out with strep throat and, an injured foot, and Chris Walker was suspended early in the season, and then Dorian Finney-Smith obviously suspended now, but he was injured early in the season. So, last night was Billy Donovan's 12th different starting lineup that he's trotted out so far. So that kind of gives you an idea of the chaos in the lineup. But, they still played pretty well. I mean, I have them ranked as the 31st best team in the country. At 13-13, that sounds kind of weird, but, it really comes down to the fact that just about every close game they played, and really with the exception of the Vandy game last night, and a couple earlier games against Alabama and Arkansas, all those close games they've lost, and they haven't even necessarily, it's not that they've been executing poorly at the end of those games. There's some occasions where that's happened, but, there's been other occasions where they've actually played pretty well at the end of games, defended well, and guys have just made shots on them, and that's part of the reason they've lost 4 one-point games this season.
And on the other side of that, Kentucky has won a number of very close games. LSU a week ago, 2 overtime games against Ole Miss and A&M. I realize they have a lot of talent, but what are your metrics, what do your analytics show for the Wildcats?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty impressive run, because those are really the only 3 games that were in doubt, in the final minute or so. To be this deep into the season and having won 26 games and really only have 3 of those games, be interesting in the waning seconds, I think says a lot about their team. Obviously, the SEC is not necessarily as strong as the ACC or the Big 12 this season, but there's a number, 7, 8, 9 teams that are kind of in the top, in the 25 to 50 range really in terms of rankings. So some good teams there. No easy wins on the road when you're playing teams like that. So overall, the metrics kicked on pretty well. The best defense in the country, pretty easily. Their offense, I have ranked 8th in the country, and they're not necessarily known for their offense, but I wouldn't say it's an elite offense, but it's very, very good. And when you pair it with maybe one of the better defenses of the past decade, obviously that speaks to what Kentucky's doing, and the fact that they have a legitimate chance to go indeed.
Ken, let's talk about the rest of the SEC. You obviously follow the sport very closely. It is much maligned, although it was last year as well, until 3 teams made it to the Sweet 16 and 2 to the Final Four, and then suddenly all the critics move on and go, hey, it was a pretty good year. Look at what happened in March. What's your assessment of the SEC other than Kentucky?
Yeah, last year there was a little more strength at the top because you had, in addition to Kentucky, you had Florida, and then Tennessee really surged late in the tournaments. But beyond that, there wasn't a lot of depth at the top of the conference. And this year, you don't have another, legitimate top 10 team, maybe a legitimate top 20 team outside of Kentucky. But, the middle of the conference is a lot stronger. As I said earlier, there's a bunch of teams in that 25 to 50 range, really 9 teams, in that group. They're not all going to go to the tournament, but, the SEC will be well represented. Right now, Joe Lunardi has 6 teams in, and that may be a max. One of those teams may end up dropping out late, but the conference is getting better, sort of in that mid level. Probably led by Arkansas, and their star center Bobby Portis, who is having an outstanding season for them. They're probably the most qualified at this point to join Kentucky in maybe the second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
When you look at a league, obviously you look at the top. What about the bottom? What can you learn from looking at the cellar of the SEC, or any league for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be a little bit careful of, how much emphasis you put on that. Right now the issue is, the teams with new coaches, obviously Bruce Pearl at Auburn, in the transition year, they've struggled a bit. Well, they've had a key victory here and there. Obviously not really a factor nationally. Kim Anderson at Missouri, kind of in the same boat. Neither of those teams have been terribly competitive this year. But having new coaches, they have a little bit of a honeymoon. The other teams that have struggled, Tennessee, another team with a new coach, obviously, 6 and 7 in conference play, but probably not headed to the tournament. And Mississippi State as well has struggled for consecutive years now under Rick Ray. So I don't know that you necessarily need to put a lot of emphasis on that when rating a conference. But certainly it adds, I think, to the prestige when you have a situation like the Big 12 where really there's really only one bad team out of 10 in the conference. I mean, every game there is a war, and you do have a couple nights off on the SEC schedule. But as I said, I think maybe not the very bottom of the conference, but the bottom middle of the conference is a lot better than it was last season.
Ken Pomeroy, KenPom.com, giving us the latest on Kentucky, the SEC, and in particular Florida being unlucky. Ken, thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right, you bet, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Good stuff.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
This week on the baseball front, we had this predictably bogus apology by A-Rod, and it prompted some to research among the most famous sports apologies of all time. And would you believe that in the New York Times today, among the most memorable, not the most famous, but the most memorable, that an SEC coach made the list? An SEC head football coach made the list. Know who it is?
Bobby Petrino?
That would have been mine.
That's not him?
Yeah, I would have gone pretty heavy on Bobby Petrino, but apparently Nick Saban was included. And it was in the aftermath of Nick Saban's worst loss at Alabama in 2007. And in all honesty, it captivated our audience for about 3 days, even though the Iron Bowl was coming up. What happened was this. I'll just read the Times article because I don't want to be misquoted or misquote the intent. But in today's New York Times, bear with me here as I read, it says, Nick Saban, the Alabama head coach, showed a similar lack of perspective in 2007 when he discussed the Crimson Tide's loss to Louisiana Monroe by invoking some of the worst events in American history. Quoting now, this really happened at his Monday press conference. Changes in history usually occur after some kind of catastrophic event, Saban said. Right as I was reading it, the article blew up on me. I think Nick Saban is more powerful than we gave him credit. Changes in history usually occur after some kind of catastrophic event. It may be 9/11, which sort of changed the spirit of America relative to catastrophic events. Pearl Harbor kind of got us ready for World War II, and that was a catastrophic event. That was a quote from Saban. This is the Times now. The apparent comparison was so outrageous that the Associated Press sought comment from a university spokesman who tried his own version of the Jedi mind trick, insisting that reporters had not heard what they just heard. Quoting now, what Coach Saban said did not correlate losing a football game with tragedy. Everyone needs to understand that. Jeff Purinton, the spokesman, said. He was not equating losing football games to those catastrophic events. Yes, he was. But thank you, Jeff, for a memorable quote, and congratulations, Jeff, for making the front sports page of the New York Times. It was the most controversial thing Saban has done at Alabama. It's been long forgotten, but when he said that, and it ran over and over, I mean, it made everywhere.
You got to be careful what you say, especially when it comes to tragedies that have happened within this country. You don't want to make those comparisons. You have some fondness for the New York Yankees. What do you make of A-Rod's apology? Do you think he just rolled out of bed, grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and scribbled something down? That's my guess.
Yeah, I didn't get too upset about it. I mean, I know everyone in New York has, turned it into a tabloid back page, but the bottom line is that very few people, if anyone, takes A-Rod seriously right now. So I yawned. Jim is next. Jim, what's on your mind?
Well, what do you call it? You provoked me or prompted me. I remember well how you jumped on that statement. Do you remember?
I remember being pretty angry about it.
You
yes.
were jumping all over it, and I jumped hard with you because it was the first time I had come in. I didn't like the guy when he got here. I just didn't like him. I didn't like his attitude, and I told you I didn't like it. I just didn't like his attitude. Now I've changed my mind, but back then he was an LSU coach that came here, and I just thought he had an arrogant, kind of a I don't know, kind of an attitude I just didn't like in public, and I still don't like some of the things, the way he handles the press, etc. But boy, you were all about him, and then when that happened, man, you crawled him, and I loved it. But you crawled him good about that. How do you compare? You said compare him what with what? A football game? I can't believe it. I wish you had a tape of that. I mean, how you said all that. You might not get.
I wish I did too, because you
wouldn't have got on the sideline maybe a couple of years ago.
I wouldn't have made the A-Day head coach.
That's right. You probably wouldn't have made the A-Day. But at least, Paul, you spoke out back then, man. You spoke up like Kenny Phoneby or whatever his name is. I mean, good night. Anyway, it was good stuff. It was really good because I agree. I mean, he did a good sales job. I mean, he had some people kind on that subject of the way he plays that, didn't he?
Well,
the Alabama people
remember,
to lose a football game than to lose a war.
Yeah, he had lost to Louisiana Tech 21-14. It was a humiliating loss.
I know.
And a lot of people took his side and just said he was trying to change the direction and get his team ready for the next game. I didn't buy it. I just thought it was a boneheaded statement. I'm not trying to relive it. I mean, it's been.
He was humiliated, and he wanted to try. That was his way of coming back. That was his firing back. That's kind of like one rare time he acted like eye monkey. That's one of the rare times he might have thought you actually acted like eye monkey, trying to rebound from being knocked flat on his face.
Well, I thought back then Saban made a lot of mistakes. Unfortunately, few people heard about them because the media was so all in to defend him and protect him that you really didn't hear too much about anything for that matter.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that was the game when he lost that game. It was like the record went to like 5-6 or 6-6 at that time because it was in the end of the year when that happened, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. They ended up 6-6, so they were 6-4. That made Alabama 6-5. Then they lost the next game to Auburn, which was 6-6.
Right, and barely escaped by winning the bowl game.
Yeah, they won the.
He had a losing record that year.
Yeah, it was the Independence Bowl against Colorado. That saved Alabama from a losing record.
Well, Paul, it reminds me. We played all these crazy tapes of some of us that have been weird and bad, terrible calls and embarrassing. If only we could get some tapes of you, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Man, that'd be worth something. That'd get me tuning in again consistently if we could hear some of that stuff.
So that's back when I was good, right?
Paul, you said it. I'm not going to mess with your words. You just said it. Back when you were good.
Back when
you would speak up and you were independent and Shane would come in there and say something behind you.
You missed those days.
I really did, Paul. I really did.
You missed when the show was smoking.
Sorry, Jim. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there for that. I know that you wish I was around during those times.
You keep having some kind of crack in the wall that noises come out of, Paul. I don't know what you need to do something about those noises that come out of the wall sometimes when you and I are discussing serious stuff.
It's the spoken word, Jim.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, Jim.
You remember the old stand down Vickers?
Down, boy.
Needs reinforcement, Paul. You did a dog and pony show yesterday. By the way, I talked to a guy that heard the show yesterday. He really enjoyed the dog and pony show. He laughed. He said, "Can you believe Paul's doing that stuff?" I said, "Yeah. You heard it, didn't you?"
Wouldn't have done that in the past, Jim. Not when
No. You were a tough guy back then, Paul. You wouldn't even let a kitty cat come around you back then.
Not when we were number one.
Well, we had some good days, didn't we, Paul? Really
Jim, I just wish I could remember them better because it's been so long.
Have you got all-timers or all-timer?
I'm not really sure which one it is, but I've got something, Jim, because I don't remember when this show was good.
Oh, no. I'm trying to remind you to get you pepped up again, or you can get rid of that cough.
There was a time, Jim, that people talked about this program, that people enjoyed listening to it, that you'd walk into a coffee shop.
People would rush to the radio, like you saw in those movies when they did that old War of the Worlds deal that my granddaddy told me about. They'd rush to the sit down.
Orson Welles.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, that was Orson Welles.
They would rush to the radio to hear the Finebaum show. They would rush. There was a crowd standing around radio.
Yeah, I mean it was like yelling fire in a movie theater.
That's exactly right.
It's unbelievable. When we travel the South,
oh, come on, Paul, you can do it. You still got it in you if you can do it.
When we travel the South, Paul, you have to walk around holding the sign, "I'm Paul Finebaum." I mean, you got to let people know it's tough. Jim, back then, what was he doing? Traveling the world? And people just knew who he was, right?
You'd be surprised. Back then?
All right, Paul, I'm going to let you go.
No, I mean, that's the hard part about you get older and you've been in a job a long time, and I mean all the memories of you that you have are the way it used to be, and about the good old days before we were somebody and something. If I could only remember. We'll be right back.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We welcome you back to our program. Let's continue. Dennis is in Kentucky on this Thursday afternoon. Hey, Dennis.
Hi, how you doing, Paul?
Really well, thanks.
I just wanted to make a comment about your rivalries. I think most of those are dwelled from the coaches themselves, the personality of the coaches. You're in the Bear, and and you had Shug down there at Auburn. That developed such a rivalry that I don't think anybody it's like a tradition after they started it. I think basically, and you had Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes that got you Michigan, Ohio State. It was almost like a religion for those coaches. That's the way they developed their teams, and they developed those rivalries. And over the years, I think it grew into what it is. But without a doubt, I think Auburn and Alabama has definitely the strongest rivalry in our conference. UK and Tennessee in basketball used to be really tremendous that way. With especially, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm glad you brought that up because when I was in school, that was the biggest rivalry in the SEC.
Oh yeah, old Ruppwood, and you had Duvall and Mears down there, and they probably hated each other like the same way with Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. He used to prepare that team just like just like they were going to battle. Woody Hayes did. He was very serious about that particular game, and I'm sure that's how most of them got started. I think even at one time it used to be Texas, and Texas had a rivalry with Alabama there too. You had to hook 'em horns, and
they played each other in a number of bowl games, and
the Cotton Bowl, I think,
Texas won.
They made a few times.
I think Texas won every one of them, by the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I don't think Alabama ever got over that 17-16 deal with Shug was up there at Auburn.
You're right.
That used to stick in their craw for a long time. But I think that the personality of those coaches was such that it.
Actually, they did. I think Alabama won 9 consecutive games in that rivalry after that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was, the Bear, of course, the Bear used to be here in Kentucky. I'm sure you heard the comment what happened while he left. I think when Adolph Rupp's birthday came around, they gave him a Cadillac. And when the Bears came up, they gave him a cigarette lighter.
I've heard that story.
That was true, I heard.
What's interesting, though, and I've talked to a number of friends, they became very close friends after the fact.
Yeah.
And,
they did.
When Rupp brought his teams to Tuscaloosa, they got together, and there was probably, thanks for the call, there probably wasn't enough room in Lexington for both the Bear and the Bear and the Bluegrass. Thank you for the call, though. Stephen is in Alabama, and you are next up. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going, Paul?
Pretty well, thanks.
Good. Yes, sir. I was calling. I was wanting to see if I can get some of your input on the LSU coach, Mr. Famous Les Miles. It looks like he hadn't really accomplished much since he, got handed some of Saban's recruits at LSU. And, he to me, he's really been, kind of underachieving since then, since his national championship run. I was just wondering what you think about him being fired, or what the chances if he doesn't win at least 10 games this year, what the chances are of him being fired.
Well, let me say this: you can argue his first national championship in 2007, even though he won with 2 losses, both in overtime, was that helped by Saban's recruiting? You can make that argument, but don't forget, in 2011. LSU was undefeated in the SEC, won the SEC championship against Georgia, and had the misfortune, and I say that, of playing Alabama again after that epic 1-2 game in Tuscaloosa, and they were run out of the Superdome. So I would say he has done something since then. His teams are usually competitive, but in the last couple of years, the program has slipped a little bit. And I think LSU fans are pretty angry about that. Charles is next, or Kenny, I should say. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm doing all right, Paulie. How you doing?
Do you want me to call you Kenny or Charles?
I don't care what you call me. You care what I call you?
Never have, Charles.
Yeah, I don't care whether you care or not. I call you what I want to call you. I tell you what I want you to do, Finebaum. I want you to apologize to the listening audience out here and all the callers, and even you, for that call Straight Jacket Jim makes. That is a moron, an idiot, a stupid, I don't know what all he is. He's a low-down skank. He's lower than whale doo-doo. He's a old mangy, rabid dog. He needs to be put in his place. He says your show ain't no good no more. You ain't no good no more. My God,
what do you mean? He's lower than whale
doo-doo. That's at the bottom of the ocean. I tell you what, Paul, your show is better than it's ever been. He talks about how great the show was 5-10 years ago. Well, now you're on ESPN, national television. What about that, Jimbo, you crazy moron? That's why you're in a straitjacket up there taking your meds. You must have forgot to take your meds today. All right, the way you acted today, you ain't nothing. You never been nothing. You just call in and try to get Paul to brag on you. Your ego is all you study about, and you ain't got no ego. You ain't never had one. You ain't never been important to the show. You're an embarrassment to the human race. You're a moron, and you know it. I tell you another thing, Straight Jacket Jim, you'll never be, won't be, can't never will be a Charles in real town.
Got to admit, Charles comes back with guns blazing. Terrell is next in Little Rock. Hey, Terrell.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
Man, I want to talk to you about, the respect of Arkansas. I'm fighting through all these Alabama fans. Alabama's a good football team, in football. I can't say much about the basketball team. The only basketball team they had good is when they had Latrell Sprewell and Robert Horry. But their basketball team is not a factor. But I want to talk about Arkansas. Let's talk about the Razorbacks. And you, Paul, I want you to talk about the Hogs. You don't even talk about the Hogs. You're talking about everybody else.
Well,
let's talk about the
Terrell,
Razorbacks.
let me offer this. We had Coach Anderson on Tuesday. I think that's talking about Arkansas basketball, isn't it?
Well, I don't know anything about it. All I know, I didn't see your show then.
Okay.
But I'm talking about what's right now.
Well, let me. Listen. I'm not trying to be. I understand your frustration, but we opened our show on Tuesday afternoon with an interview with Mike Anderson, and we've talked a lot about the Arkansas-Kentucky game coming up a week from Saturday. I think it's one of the...
Can I give Terrell some advice, Paul? Can I give him some advice?
Yeah, go ahead.
Terrell, here's some advice. You're on national television and radio. Why don't you talk about the Hogs? Let's do it.
Let's talk about the Razorbacks. I want to talk about how to respect the Arkansas. We want to talk about the rivals and stuff like that. What about, let's go jump inside and
what is who would you say Arkansas's greatest rivalry or rival is?
Right as of right now is LSU. But it was Arkansas and Texas.
Right.
That's a big rival. That's been going on so long, and Arkansas has been beating Texas. That's a big rival. But right now, as of today, we want to say Arkansas and LSU. That's been a great, great football game. And
is that the Battle of the Boot? Is that what they call that?
The Battle of the Boot. Yes,
yeah.
Yes, sir. That's a big thing like that. That's a big time, to me.
How'd that work out for LSU this year?
Huh?
How'd that work out for LSU this year?
Oh, yeah, we beat them up pretty handily, 17-0. I love that. But, I think Jeff Long is a heck of an athletic director. I love his hire in Beadham. I like his hire with Mike Anderson bringing the 40 minutes of hell back. I think Arkansas is a team to be reckoned with right now. I know in the past we've been down, but right now, as of now, Arkansas is on a roll in basketball and football like we used to be. And I think all the teams need to respect Arkansas because Arkansas is coming up now. We're starting to recruit good. I love our recruits. I love how we're starting to recruit in the state of Florida. We have been having problems in recruiting in Florida. We lost one of our coaches to Florida, and he did a wonderful job. He's a great recruiter. But we got another guy. He came in. I can't think of his name, and he has did well in our recruiting class. So I think our recruiting class is ranked number either 22 or 21. If I believe, is it like that, Paul?
I believe that is correct. Hey, I hate to run. We're up against the clock here, but thank you for the call talking about the Razorbacks. Quick break. Another 90 minutes to go on a Thursday.
You'll never be, won't be, can't never will be a Charles in real town.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We welcome you back to the program, and Charles called out Jim. We always like to settle scores on the show, so we'll give Jim a chance to respond.
My goodness. Have you ever heard anybody elicit such hate?
He doesn't care for you, Jim.
Huh?
He really doesn't care for you very much.
How do you think I feel about that old moron, that old lunatic dumbass? You said it the other day, yesterday, and he's a cruel, evil old man. That's what he is. But you know what, Paul? You talk about the hate meter. Have you ever heard anybody that just goes absolutely like a rabid mad dog?
He's a wind-up doll.
Yeah, that's all he is. And it's because, Paul, page 54. Page 54 of the Finebaum book. Everybody in America needs to buy and read page 54. Paul Finebaum's, what's the name of it? My conference can beat your conference, or my conference is better than your conference.
Whatever. It doesn't matter.
I know, and I should get a cut of this take from today's promo that I'm doing right now. But page 54, that's why the old maniac goes crazy, ranting, screaming like I bet blood was coming, drooling out of the sides of his mouth.
I tell you another thing, Straight Jacket Jim, you'll never be, won't be, can't never will be a Charles in real
You know what,
town.
Paul? There's something to be thankful for, that when that old moron says you'll never be a real town clown that he is. I mean, good night. Who wants to be a fifth-teamer? And speaking of what you used to do, Paul, we talked about this before. The old morons like that guy would never make the cut. Never made the cut in those days, 7 or 8 years ago, when the show was great, and you had superior callers that were excellent, most of them, and you gave them 5, 10, 15 minutes, as much as they needed, because they knew what they were talking about, and they were compelling. Not just me either.
Huh? You thought the show was better back then? He's on ESPN now. let me tell you something.
Am I going to get the talk?
Well, what was that? Hold
over
on.
there.
Slow down, Charles. Slow down.
Is that a tape or is that the real?
Jim, I think that's the real Charles.
Yeah, that's what Tommy said.
No.
Man, this old fool.
He is a jealous old rude.
He's a disgrace to the human race, and y'all better ban him, or I'm going to quit calling this dead blind show.
When you were what you used to be, the best in the business, you still can be the best.
So you're saying, Jim, back in the old days, we wouldn't have tolerated callers like Charles.
That's right. You know you wouldn't have. He's not even a fifth teamer. He wouldn't even make the fifth team squad. He's just an old ranting moron, idiot, imbecile. Never in my life, he's never done anything but scream and try to act tough. Country boy, you know what? That's all he's got to is, which is...
Jim, I have to say, this is one of your more sapient calls.
No, it's not really sapient. It's just the honest truth. He's jealous, and he don't like what you said on page 54.
I just read page 54. A beautiful story about Phyllis from Olga. She's been through a lot.
He don't like 59 to nothing. 59 to nothing. Texas A&M. Remember, Paul, remember?
I do remember that. That was one of my favorite moments of the year.
And so is page 54.
I need to buy this book to get pages. My book doesn't have page 54, but
I know. Everybody wants to read it. They throw it out.
Yeah. I checked one out at the library, missing page 54.
But I'm serious. I want to get serious with you. Have you ever heard anybody that calls somebody straitjacket and sounds like that old man?
No.
I mean, seriously, have you ever heard? That guy is sick. That old man is sick. He's spiritually sick. He's pathetic. I mean, really, he's just pathetic. He's a sad case, Paul, and you know that.
I do.
And please don't let him have access to any more women, nice women that were trying to be nice to him. You can't be nice to a mad dog, Paul. You really can't read.
No, you're right. He comes off as a rabid dog. I mean, there are friendlier dogs in junkyards on the south side of Chicago.
That's right. That's right. And they don't mess around with Jim. Thanks, Paul.
Well done. Jim ended the lyrics of a 1971 song right on cue. Linda is up next. Hello, Linda.
Hello, sweetie pie. Cutie
hello,
pie.
Linda. Hey there.
Hey, put the camera on. Hey, what's up, Stud Muffin?
Hey, Linda.
Hey, listen,
Linda.
I'm gonna have to make up my own recipe of a cutie pie, sweetie pie for Paul, and then I don't know what kind of muffin I would make for. Well, I have something in mind, but I don't think I can say it on TV.
Hey, Linda. By the way, we looked at John showed me your high school cheerleader picture.
Paul, you're getting your women confused.
Oh, that was Debbie. I'm sorry.
No, that was Debbie.
Come on.
That was Debbie.
I got to call you out on that one. If this is a triangle happening here, I just got a leg up, my friend.
I'm sure. Linda, you heard the
that's
call from
Debbie.
You heard
That's
the call
Debbie from Kimberly. She is a stunning, woman, and I just see the picture on the. I can imagine. I can't even imagine what she looked like at high school.
I've got too many women. I have too many women in my life right now. If I can't remember which one was the head cheerleader.
Now listen, Paul. You need to keep your women straight, okay?
Rookie mistake.
Yeah. I'm pretty embarrassed.
I forgive you. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed.
I mean, Linda, you are the mature woman in my life. Debbie is a little bit on the wild side.
Oh, well, I got news for you. I could be a little bit on the wild side. I just don't let it go on TV.
Oh, okay.
You can hear me.
I'm glad I made the mistake then. At least we're getting the real you here.
Yes, I could be a little wild. But I tell you what, I'm not even going to give Charles the satisfaction anymore. I haven't been home long. I spent the day with my granddaughter and my two great-grandsons. And I didn't get in until about 45 minutes ago. But I'm not even going to give Charles the satisfaction anymore about even talking about him. I'm just not going to do it.
That is a wise decision, Linda. See, I get you confused because I'm married to a Linda, so I'm a little bit on edge when I'm talking to Linda.
Listen, you don't have to apologize for that. It's like step
Yeah,
up
that's
and say
true
it's an
love,
honest
Linda.
mistake.
Making a mistake like that and not having to apologize, just let it go. I screwed up one of the women in my life. You said, no problem.
No problem. But anyway, I heard a little bit about the rivalries. Are you still a Yankee fan?
Not really.
You're not?
No. I'm a mildly Yankee fan, but certainly not like it used to be.
Yeah. And
Yankees are really pretty hard to like these days.
Right. Yeah, I heard you say something about A-Rod. I think he did roll out of the bed, just write that down, and got in Yankee Stadium and made that apology, which sounded kind of weak to me. But anyway, I want to ask you something, Paul. Why don't these athletes, when they get in trouble, they know sooner or later they're going to get caught up with and found out? Why is it so hard for them to say?
Well, the answer, I think, is pretty simple, Linda. Most of these athletes have been enabled their entire lives from the time they played Little League ball until whatever happens at the moment that it does, and they think they're bulletproof. They think they're invincible. They don't think anything will ever go wrong, and they think they can say and do whatever however they please, and that's how they get into so much trouble. Thank you for the call. Really do appreciate it, Linda. We'll take a break. We're back with much, much more.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Certainly, it was the most viewed college basketball game of the year. Year's not over yet, but what an amazing game last night in Durham between North Carolina and Duke. And someone who knows a little bit about that game, the former college player of the year at Duke, great NBA player, won 2 rings with the Heat recently, and now an ESPN analyst. Shane Battier joins us. Shane, thanks for the time. I hope all is well.
Hey, my pleasure, Paul. It's trying to stay warm.
Well, I don't think you can find any place warm in this country right now. So, but if you do, please call me.
I will. I was wearing that winter jacket in Miami this morning, so that tells you the state of the temperature in the country right now.
Yeah, I think I saw the low tonight in Key West is going to be in the 40s. You normally think that's a secure place, but
I didn't sign up for that, Paul. I didn't sign up for that.
I never like to guess what people do on Wednesday nights, but I'm guessing that you were watching the game last night.
Yeah, that was a special game. It would take a lot for me to miss a Duke North Carolina game, and it brought me back. And that was the best played game that I had seen all year, and the intensity and the passion brought me back to 1997, 2001 in Cameron Indoor.
Yeah, but we've been talking tonight, as so many others, about rivalries, and ESPN had a list out yesterday that put the Duke North Carolina game, I believe, only behind Yankees Red Sox. I don't know if you'd agree or not, but what makes it so special?
Well, first of all, the schools are so close together. Only about 10 miles separates both schools, and so I was recruited by both schools. I had friends at Carolina, not that I would admit that when I went to school there, but the proximity of the two schools is what makes the rivalry so great. And they've played almost 300 times in the history of the rivalry. And you'd be hard-pressed to remember the years where neither team was ranked in the top 25. It seems whenever they get together, they're among the top teams in the country. And when you feel the passion behind the game and the week leading up to it, it's just a special week and a special game.
And it's interesting, we talk a lot about football rivalries and even other sports, where this one, there will be 2 and sometimes 3. I don't know if there's ever been 4. But does that take anything away from it, knowing that there's still going to be another game in 2 weeks and this one's in Chapel Hill?
Not at all. Every game is so different. Every game is so different. No matter if you win, you lose. If you win the first matchup, you know that you're getting the best effort of the other team. second time around. And I had some pretty good success in my career against Carolina. I was 8-3 lifetime. And so I count those amongst my best wins. But no, every game is different, and every game has the emotion of a Final Four atmosphere.
You know, you certainly just wrapped up a great career in the NBA, and you know, there are historic rivalries in the NBA, although with a long season it's a little bit different. But did you ever, I mean, you played on some world championship teams, but was there ever anything quite resembling what you experienced in North Carolina?
No. You know, I've been a sports fan for a long time. Growing up in Michigan, I was exposed to the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry at an early age, and seeing that rivalry up close is probably the only thing I can compare the Duke-Carolina rivalry. And even though I love the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, I'm putting Carolina-Duke on top of that one too.
Understandable. Although I would imagine while there was quite a circus around last night playing with some of the teams you have in the NBA, notably the Heat in recent years, the circus was always in town, was it not?
Yeah, only on days that ended in Y. It was a fun time. There were very few dull moments, but that's what made it special. And it was a high-intensity period for the 3 years I was there. But that made us more special to know we produced under the great scrutiny that we faced every single minute of our time there.
I mean, I don't work for TMZ.com, but having been the career you've had, I mean, the top player in all of college basketball at among the most prestigious schools, did you ever shake your head sometimes with Miami, going, I can't believe I just saw that person?
Well, Paul, it was crazy to go to name an NBA arena or a city. We would arrive in Salt Lake City at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there literally would be 25 to 30 people waiting in our lobby just to get a camera shot of LeBron or D. Wade or Chris Bosh. And that happened literally every city we went to. And so we had a grand audience. We would just go to get Starbucks in the morning, get a coffee, and there'd be people lined up outside our hotel just for a shot of LeBron. It was crazy. I played with some megawatt stars in my time, but nothing was quite like the Heatomania we faced down in Miami.
And now you just work for ESPN.
And yeah, some would consider that a step up. But there's no one waiting for me to get a selfie in the halls of Bristol, Connecticut. And so it's a little more chill this year.
That is one thing you realize. And again, I'm not up there that often, but you walk around and it is a Hall of Fame collection of athletes and former coaches. So I guess not to lessen the importance of anyone there, but it is almost routine, is it not?
It is. Other day, I was just going to get a glass of water, ran into Teddy Bruschi, and it was a week after the Super Bowl, talking Super Bowl, and that's the fun part of our job, is connecting with people who've been there, who've done it at the highest level.
Let me close by talking about college basketball, and while certainly we've emphasized the Duke-Carolina rivalry, college basketball this year almost begins and ends with Kentucky in the sentence. Your impressions of their quest for perfection?
Well, they're a really, really good team. It's to be seen whether they're going to be a great team. You proved that in March. Personally, I don't think they're losing before the NCAA tournament. I don't think there's a team in the SEC that can just match up physically. They've had some close calls, but they're by far the class. I'm interested to see how they handle the game pressure and the reality pressure of March. It's a different type of pressure. When you know your season, all that you work for the entire year, comes down to one 40-minute game in March Madness. And so it's to be seen how they handle that true game pressure, but I think they're the odds-on favorite to cut down the nets.
Finally, on that subject, I mean, there are certainly a collection of stars on that team, and it changes sometimes by the night. Can you imagine being part of something like that? I mean, certainly you played with a lot of great players, and you were among the very best, but try to put yourself on John Calipari's team right now.
Well, what Coach Calipari's done is done a great job of getting people to buy in, and which is maybe the toughest thing to do in sports when you have talent, is make sure everyone buys in and is pulling the rope in the same direction. And his guys play hard every single night. You don't see anyone loafing. They run back on defense. They challenge every shot that's taken, and that's a testament to Coach Cal. It's not just about going to Rupp Arena in the morning and unlocking the doors and rolling out the basketballs and say, "Hey, fellas, go play." It's about getting a group of individuals who happen to be very talented to buy into the system, sacrifice for the sake of team, with the chances of producing something special. And I've been fortunate to do that a few times in high school and college and in the NBA, and there's no better feeling.
Shane, thanks for the time. I know you have a long night ahead. It was great to catch up. And
all right, Paul. You do a great job. Keep it up. Enjoy listening to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN radio app.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.